He is a 400-meter hurdler. He represented Team USA in Paris, and he's now joining us in the pod. Trevor Bassitt, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
So, Trevor, before we get into the nitty gritty of your journey and competing in the Olympics, I have to ask, and this might, I don't know, we might be starting off on bad terms here, so we'll see how this goes. You listed The Office fourth overall in your top 10 sitcoms, and I have major issue with that. But before I air out my grievances, I'll give you a chance to explain why The Office is fourth.
Okay. Can you remind me who my top three were?
I wish I could. I didn't write it down. I just saw
I
Office at
think,
four.
I think I have the notes app of it still. Give me a hot second here. Yep, I
Yeah.
got it.
Okay, let's hear it.
I will say, looking back on it, I would
Hmm.
move The Office higher.
To one.
I would not put it one.
Okay.
Looking at the rankings I had Always Sunny, Modern Family, New Girl, and The Office. Looking at that now, I would probably change it and go Modern Family 1, The Office 2, New Girl 3, Always Sunny 4. And I change it because we were having a discussion about it at practice last year. And someone brought up to me, he's like, the thing with The Office is, like, it's funny, but it has so much, like, heart. And it's such, like, a deep storytelling thing versus, like, Always Sunny. I love Always Sunny. It's hilarious. But it's not going to, like, tug on the heartstrings at all. So I would move it a bit higher. Still would not be number one though.
So is it more because you're categorizing The Office as a sitcom that it's not? I mean, it sounds like that's the reason. I mean, if you're going to go like top TV shows, would The
Top
Office
TV shows is a
still?
whole other deal.
Well, right, yeah.
If
So
we're
that's why I'm
because we're
curious.
I mean, if we go top TV shows, The Office probably drops further. Because then you look at shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, The Blacklist, like those shows to me, like I get so invested into those where like
Hmm.
yeah, I think The Office would end up dropping further if we included all TV shows. And I love The Office. I've watched all the way through more times than I can count, but it's I don't know. I just like I feel like a show like Modern Family. To me, I think the jokes are funnier. And it still has that like storytelling where it, like tug on your heartstrings every now and then. So I love The Office. It's just not number one for me.
What I mean, if you're, I always think of it like I always. So the first time I watched The Office, I would pay attention 100% of the time. And I would, follow the story, do all that stuff. I mean, I feel like anytime you watch a TV show for the first time, that's usually what you do. By
Yeah,
like the fifth time that I watched The Office, it was more of a I'm doing chores around the house. I want something to just play in the background. Let me put on The Office. In
hundred
terms
percent.
of so like in terms of you're doing chores, you need some background noise. Is The Office what I'm just trying to figure out a way where I can get you to admit that The Office is number one in some ranking.
Honestly, because I've seen Modern Family a couple times through now. I go back and forth between throwing on The Office, New Girl, and Modern Family for like background noise. I go back and forth.
New Girl's fantastic too.
New
New
Girl's
Girl,
hilarious.
it's fantastic. All right, one last Office question because we're not going to turn this into an Office podcast. But if you had to go favorite character, least favorite character,
Like rank them.
yeah. I mean, you don't have to rank every single one, but if you had to pick one favorite and then one
Right,
least
right,
favorite,
right. Least favorite? I'm not a huge Pam guy. I don't
okay.
I don't know if she falls into least favorite, but of like the significant people on the show, like if we're talking like Michael, Jim, Dwight, Pam, even if you throw in like Kevin, like people like that, I'm like, yeah, I think she's probably one of my least favorite. Um, because obviously you go like a deeper cut and be like Tony when they merged the two offices together. Like, but from the yeah, I'd probably say Pam. Favorite? I mean, favorite, I feel like it has to be Michael Scott because the show's so great. And the show was good once he left, but it wasn't necessarily the same. So I will have to take the basic answer and go Michael Scott to avoid being any more controversial than I already have been so far with The Office.
You're already the office people are coming after you, Trevor.
They
They're
probably will be, yeah.
do you know who Ryan Russillo is?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he has also said that Pam, well, he had a slightly different take on Pam. He actually said that Pam is a straight up like bad partner and kind of a bad human
I
being.
I've had the same take. My wife and I have had that discussion before.
Okay. Oh, I'm curious from your perspective, what makes you say that?
I just feel like, I mean, she did like technically cheat on Roy while they were engaged. And then Jim's like busting his butt, working two jobs so he can like live his dream, but also cater to her. And then she just like, while she's working and watching after the kids, but I don't know. I just feel like there were times where Jim sacrificed a lot and she just kind of didn't really appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, you're now the second that the first person I ever heard say that was Ryan, but you are now the second person who said that Pam, listen, might not be the best partner or the best person. I think it's an interesting take. I mean, we could probably spend an hour debating it.
Oh, yeah.
But but I think more so what the audience wants to know, besides your office takes, is how a kid from Bluffton, Ohio, makes Team USA. So, Trevor, please, for those unfamiliar with Ohio and its geography, and especially Bluffton, how would you describe that city?
So, Bluffton, if we're speaking in legal terms, is legally classified as a village because it's so small we don't fit the criteria of like a town, whatever. So, we're legally a village. We're about 30, I want to say 30 to 45 minutes away from Indiana. We're in Northwest Ohio. So, like, whenever my parents go to fly somewhere, they either fly to Columbus or Detroit because it's the same distance to go to Columbus versus going to Detroit. So, it's Northwest Ohio, small town, 4,000 people. I think we have two stoplights. Just cornfields everywhere, corn, beans, the whole nine. Graduated with 80 some kids. Um, Yeah, I mean, small town, not much to do on Friday nights except in the fall go to football games, in the winter go to basketball games. So that's it. The whole town just kind of like rallies around the high school, rallies around sports teams, and yeah, it's pretty basic, small town USA type stuff.
Do you think ultimately growing up in a town like that helped or hindered you?
Helped 100%. Um, because I think it really taught me how to like focus on myself, how to, and it also helped me kind of like people hold me accountable. Because like if you're in a big city or you go to a school where there's like 500 some kids in your graduating class, teachers necessarily might not be able to hold you as accountable as they should because going to Bluffton, again, I graduated with 80 kids. Our class size was around like 18 to 20. Everybody knows each other. I knew every kid in my class, first name, middle name, last name, parents' names, like, so everybody knows each other really well. So I remember one time, it was my sophomore year of high school. I had a math teacher, and she's still my favorite teacher to this day. And I think I got like a B or something on a test. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. But she handed me the test, and she just goes, what are you doing? Like, you're better. Like, I know you're better than that. You know you're better than that. Like, what's the deal here? What are we doing? And from that moment on, I was like, wow. Like, I kind of had to look at myself and be like, wow, she's right. And so I think it really helped me. And it helped me kind of take advantage of holding myself accountable, making good connections with my teachers, my classmates. So then when I went to college, I was able to kind of keep up that same trend.
It's interesting because my parents always talk about they grew up in the small city and they grew up in the small country, but then on top of that, in a small city. So they grew up in Montenegro, which is
Okay.
a small country in Europe, next to Croatia, if people are familiar with the region. But like they would always talk about how growing up in a small city, it's like everybody knew you and everybody knew your parents. Like if you're out doing some hooligan stuff, your parents would hear about it right away because somebody would
That's
catch you doing it.
exactly, it's exactly true. I got in trouble a good amount of times just because somebody recognized me and they had my dad's phone number and just called him up and were like, "Hey, we saw Trevor doing da da da."
Yeah, it's I I wonder though, like, does that ever get to you? Like, does it ever become too much? Like, do you ever feel like you're always being watched in a sense?
No, not really, but also like I only had to get in trouble a couple times to realize like I need to avoid stuff like that, or else my parents are gonna find out. My parents are gonna be mad. So, and I mean, I also didn't know any better. So, like, if I had been like, let's say I went through middle school in like the city of Columbus, and then moved to Bluffton and went to school there for 4 years, then I feel like for sure I'd have that feeling like I can't do anything. Everyone's always watching me. Me. Everybody knows my parents. But that was really all I ever knew.
So speaking of your parents, you are quoted in separate interviews saying that you learned a lot of your work ethic from them and how big of an impact that they've had on your journey. So can you speak a little bit to that and that work ethic?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my dad, when I was going through high school, my dad was a truck salesman, like a work truck salesman, and my mom was an elementary school teacher. She just retired this past fall. Um, but yeah, I mean, they just always taught me that like you get what you earn. You have to work for everything. Like you're not gonna have anything handed to you, especially in sports. So it was something like if I was really bad at sports, which when I started doing sports in middle school, I was terrible. I was terrible at track. I was terrible at basketball. But it wasn't like when I got in the car to go home after a practice, it wasn't a let's have a pity party. Like it's okay. Like no, it was like, yeah, you're bad. You know you're bad. I know you're bad. You can work at it to fix it, or you can just deal with it because those are really your two choices. So that kind of really helped me grow and to understand that it's okay to be bad at something, but if you're not going to work at it, then that's just life. You just have to deal with it.
Why hurling? I was reading that I mean, your family is pretty athletic to say the least. A long-standing history of athleticism, which I was hoping you could touch on. And then, in addition to that, I mean, why go after hurdling?
So yeah, to touch on the family background a little bit. My dad didn't go to college. He just went straight to the workforce after. But he was a pretty good football player and a really good basketball player. I think he told me he had like some D3 offers. But obviously went into the workforce. My mom was a cheerleader and a high school sprinter. They had the school record in the 4x1 for a little while when she was there. My oldest sister, Kendra, was a two-time All-American at the Division II level in the heptathlon and the hep and pent. My other older sister, Lindsay, was a D3 hurdler at Heidelberg for a little bit. And my brother was a good high school high jumper until he broke his leg playing basketball. My aunt was a Division I volleyball player. Um, there's probably some other people in the family I'm leaving out, so hopefully they don't get too mad that I forgot. My one cousin played D3 basketball. So I started doing track in middle school, mainly because I just felt like it was something I was supposed to do. Like all my older siblings did track, so I'll do track. And I planned on doing like the 400 or the 800. And then nobody signed up for the hurdles. And the middle school track coach was like, "Hey, Trevor, your older siblings do hurdles. So I feel like you're the least likely one to seriously hurt yourself doing this." So I was like, okay. And I just started doing it. And again, I was terrible. I didn't win a single race. I was getting my teeth kicked in every race. But that was kind of how I ended up like falling into the hurdles.
And I think there's a video or at least a picture, and then your mom talking about it. You falling asleep on the bleachers. I think during your siblings' track
Yeah,
and field events.
at the state track meet because state track meet Division III would always the first race would always start at 9 a.m. And for a while there, my parents would just like wake me up at like 6 a.m. to get in the car to leave because Columbus is about an hour 45, 2 hours away. So they'd drive down. I was just a kid. I'd be tired. The sun was hot. I was bored because I didn't like watching kids. I didn't like watching people race. So I'd hang out for a little bit. And once I got tired, I'd make myself a little section. I'd fall asleep in the stands.
I gotta tell you, I used to swim when I was younger, and those
Mhm.
swim meets would, especially if you have like an early event, then a late event. I mean, you would. I remember like there was some swim meets where we'd get there. It was like 7 a.m. You know, like your first race is at 8, and then like your next race is at 3 or 4,
Yeah.
and you finish your first race, you find a little nice spot or you lay out a towel. And I'll tell you what, man, those swim meet naps were some of the probably one of the better naps of my entire life. They just hit way
Oh,
different.
for sure. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was. And then the same thing happened with water polo, which I eventually started playing. Um, but by then I was older. I was like in high school, but still, like those,
Mhm.
like in between games, those naps, it was a different world.
Water polo is crazy.
Yeah.
That sport is nuts.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever see there's some YouTube videos where like at the Olympics they'll have like the underwater cameras
Hmm.
and they're just like constantly kicking each other and
Yep.
like well that's the thing about water polo which like not a lot of people realize is like um obviously there are refs, but the refs can only see so much and it's a very unique
Right.
sport because you can't see the entire athlete's body. Like, right? Like half of it is
Mhm.
underwater. So like whatever happens underwater, like that was always kind of our saying is like whatever happens underwater kind of just stays underwater. So like there was a lot of stuff that you could get away with that
Mhm.
just the ref wouldn't see. So yeah, definitely interesting sport. But let's get back to you. So you start doing hurdles. Doesn't go too well to begin with. Um,
No.
but I'm assuming you eventually hit your stride. I think you went on to the state championships. So like what was that in high school at least, that transition from hey, I kind of suck at this to like, oh my god, wait, like I'm actually pretty good.
Yeah, so I was a late bloomer athletically, like going into high school. I don't remember how tall I was, but I wasn't very tall. By the time I graduated, I was 6'3". So I really just found a way to like fall in love with the process, with working out, was just trying to get a little bit better. So by the time my freshman year ended, I had moved up to being one of the like top 10 freshmen in the state in the high hurdles. So then we kind of started to see some growth there. Sophomore year, I qualified for the state championships for the first time. And then I ran terribly. I got like second to last. Come back junior year at the regional meet, I was the number 3 hurdler in the 300 hurdles. Regional prelims, I fall on the second to last hurdle. My spike gets caught in the ground. I don't even get a leg to go over it. Just face plant right through the hurdle. So that ended my 300 hurdles there. But I was able to kind of bounce back at the state championships and win in the high hurdles. First state championship, first high hurdler from my school to win a state championship. Felt like I was on top of the world. Senior year rolls around, and I qualify in both hurdles this time. End up getting second in the state in the high hurdle, so I didn't defend my title. It was one of the fastest years in history for like a top two. I ran 0.33 faster than the time I had ran the year before that won. I ran 3/10 of a second faster and lost, but then was able to bounce back in the 300 hurdles, run over a half second personal best to win the 300 hurdles. And that kind of wrapped up my high school career.
And so now your high school career is done and you're starting
Yep.
to look at universities and colleges and where you'd was it did you have the mindset of I want to continue to pursue this in college or were you kind of just waiting for I guess to see how things turned out?
Yeah, so for me, I always wanted to do track in college because I felt like it was a way to get college a little cheaper. Everybody knows how expensive college is. I'm like, hey, like I like doing it. If I can end up getting some money off of college, that would be great. And I had like next to no D1 looks. I ended up committing to Division II Ashland University in the fall of my senior year because I knew I wanted to sign early because I didn't want to have to deal with like taking visits, the stress of being recruited during the season. So I ended up committing to Ashland University, Division II program, and that was the best decision I could have ever made.
So you go to Ashland. like you mentioned, a D2 school. This is actually kind of crazy. 5,000 undergrad students. Is that right?
That sounds about right. Yeah. Most of them are athletes as well.
That's why, I mean, that I think my high school, well, actually, it's not that close. I was about to say my high school graduating class, oh, I think was probably like close to 1,000. So not very
That's,
close, but, but,
I couldn't wrap my head around that.
yeah, now that I say it out loud, I guess that is kind of crazy. I never thought about it. um, but you go to Ashland. What was interesting to me is you get your MBA from Ashland, and so was how confident were you that track and field and hurdles was going to be your future? And did getting the MBA, was that sort of a fallback plan in case things didn't go well in the track universe?
So I didn't plan on being a professional track and field athlete until after my sophomore season when I won the national championship in the 400 hurdles. And then I took a month off after that meet, and we were waiting to see if I was going to get into the USA championships. And I got into the USA championships in both hurdles, the high hurdles and the 400 hurdles. So we tried to like ramp up training quick for like 3 weeks, get back into somewhat decent shape. Well, I go out to the US championships in Des Moines, Iowa, run a PB, make the semifinal. Don't make the final. I got knocked out. But so when we were driving back because my family and I drove from Ohio to Iowa. And we're driving back, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, and I'm like, I just got 13th in the United States in a champion at a U.S. championships when there's a world championship. So when there's a world championship, more people are going to go to USA's to try to make the team. So I'm like, I got 13th of the U.S. championships in a world championship year. I had taken a month off of training, and I'm only a sophomore in college. So that moment was when for me I was kind of like, okay, if we keep working as we keep progressing, I could possibly be a professional. Now, the NBA was mainly just because I had the COVID year. I had an extra year of eligibility. I had gotten eighth at the Olympic trials in 2021, didn't make the team. And there wasn't really much like it would have been not a good business or career decision to go turn pro when I could go back to school, get my MBA for free, use that last year of eligibility, develop for another year before turning pro. So that's essentially how that I had never planned on getting an MBA, but I had the extra year. Our head coach Judd was like, "Hey, like we'll cover everything except for books." Or he said we'll cover everything except for housing. It's got food, meal plan, classes, everything. You just got to take care of your housing. So I'm like, yeah, that's a perfect plan. I don't have to worry about it. And then yeah, that was kind of how the MBA came about on top of how I kind of found myself into the professional starting to think like a professional athlete.
I have two questions, and I'm trying to decide
Yeah.
which one I want to ask first. Let me go with this one. So let me read you a quote of yours. So you said after the 2021 U.S. Olympic team trials, I made a post on my social media saying that I'm not going to miss another USA team for the rest of my career. I truly believed it, and I still believe that to be the case. And since I did that post, I have not missed a team yet. So it has worked out. This kind of ties back to this whole idea of manifestation. And I've talked to a lot of athletes on this podcast about it. I've read a lot about it. I listen to other people talk about it. George Mumford, if you're familiar with his work, talks about this a ton. He's worked with MJ, with Kobe, just getting their psyche in a good state. He believes in meditation and manifestation and all this stuff. And it's like one of those words that I feel like most people hear thrown out and they'll read about it, but don't necessarily know exactly what it means and then how to practice it. From your perspective, that social media post and everything that has come since then, is that an example of manifestation that you did? And then if you could just give us some practical tips on how we could maybe implement manifestation with some of our own goals.
So when I did that, I didn't think about it like manifestation. I thought of it almost, and I mean, this could fall into the category of manifestation, but I thought of more of a category of like calling your own shot, I'm going to put this out there as a way to like help hold me accountable. So when like I'm going through a hard season or a hard training block or have a down period, remembering being like, hey, I have this post out there, especially now as a pro, knowing that there are people out there just waiting for me to miss a team so they can reshare that post and be like, oh, what happened? I thought you were going to miss one for the rest of your career. So for me, it was almost more so like calling my shot, having that confidence in myself, and a way to hold yourself accountable. I think it goes in hand with manifestation in terms of like vocalizing your goal, actually saying it out loud to another person. Now, obviously, I didn't say it out loud per se, but I put it out there for countless people to see. And that's something that's kind of like helped me keep going and to get through those hard moments, being like, I made this goal, this commitment to myself and to everybody. Like I didn't say I'm going to only miss a couple teams or I'm going to make most of the teams. I said, no, I'm going to make every single team that I compete for, that I compete at those championships. And that's a tough goal given that I'm competing for the United States and that it's really cutthroat to try to make teams, especially this past Olympic team. So I think for me, in terms of like daily tips, one thing I did, I'm a big fan of visualization, big fan of like putting on noise canceling headphones. I'll throw on like some film score music and I'll just like visualize my race. Um, I don't know. I'm sure there are ways you can use that in like day to day, but it's just kind of visualizing going through the race, different scenarios that can happen, but no matter what, it always ends how I want it to end. So I might visualize myself kind of being behind after 150, but I always get home and win. Or I start out fast and then people kind of come up on me late. So there's visualization. And yeah, I just think vocalizing it. For the Olympic trials every day, I started brushing my teeth with my left hand that I picked up from, they talked about it on during the college football playoff with JJ McCarthy. So I started brushing my teeth with my left hand while saying out loud various phrases of like, I'm going to make the Olympic team. I'm a top 3 hurdler in the world and the United States. I'm going to execute this part of my race and stuff like that. So I just think verbalizing, having people to hold you accountable, it doesn't matter how scary your goal is. If you can tell like 1 or 2 people that you know you can trust, that's just going to help you because you're going to have a moment, whether it's a physical goal with like working out or even like a financial goal, like saving money. If you have someone text you and they say, hey, have you spent money on going out to eat? And you're like, yeah, I kind of have. Then they can hold you accountable. But if you have these bigger goals that nobody knows about, you can kind of let yourself off the hook.
What was the left hand? JJ McCarthy used to brush his teeth with his left hand.
So, yeah, so they talked about it during the broadcast. And it's if you brush your teeth with your non dominant hand while like saying phrases of affirmation, words of affirmation, it can help like rewire your brain and how your brain thinks. So, like, Michigan lost, I think the year before. I think that was the year they lost to TCU and he like didn't have a good game. And they said like for the rest of the year leading up to last year's national championship that he would always like say like I'm going to be a national champion or I'm going to prepare like a national champion today and things of that nature while brushing with a non-dominant hand. So it kind of rewires how your brain works. So you just it might help you feel more confident or less nervous in those big moments.
Well, I am going to start brushing my teeth with my left hand, and
I got really good at it. I was at the
so okay,
trials for 2 weeks. I did it every day
yeah,
for 2 weeks to the point where after the Olympic trials, when I switched back, it felt weird for a little bit.
it's like your left hand is now your dominant hand, so you had to go
Yeah.
back to your right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So let me tell a story, and then I'll follow it up with a question. So I
Okay.
read about Michael Phelps. I think I want to say it was '08 in Beijing, or it was 2012 in London. It might be 2012 in London. I'm forgetting which one, but he was competing, obviously, in the Olympics. He dives off the board. Midway through the race, his goggles break. He's completely blind. And he still managed to finish first. And he talks about how after the race, he was pissed that his goggles broke because he think he would have set a world record had they not.
Mhm.
But he still finished first overall in the race, which just speaks to the competitor that Phelps was. But he talked about afterward how he was completely prepared for that scenario because it's something that he practiced almost every
Mhm.
time he got into the pool. He was like, okay, well, I need to prepare. If my goggles do break, I need to know what's going to happen. And he would count his strokes so that he knew exactly how many strokes it would take him to get across the pool. And so, like, if he was completely blind underwater, like, it was no issue for him. And I thought
Mhm.
that story, first of all, insane. Second of all, really telling to the power of practice and just doing something over and over and over to the point where it's just muscle memory. Do you do anything similar? And then on top of that, just the importance of practice. We always talk about, I mean, Allen Iverson has that quote, we're talking about practice, but everybody talks about how important practice is, but can you just expand and really give us a sense of the true importance of practice?
Yeah, I mean, there's a quote that I've heard that I remind myself of like every time, especially going into a big race. And it's you don't rise to the level of the competition, you fall to the level of your training. So everyone likes to think that like great athletes in these big moments, they're like, oh, they're rising to the occasion, they're like stepping up their game. And it's like, no, they're not. They're falling back to the level of the training that they've been doing. And then they mix it obviously with the mental part to make sure they're fully ready. So I think, yeah, like the Michael Phelps scenario of like practicing it every day because you know, like it's not very likely, but it is likely. Um, I think it's interesting though because you also have the scenario where when Peyton Manning played for the Colts, there was a training camp practice where like this reporter was watching. He said, "Hey, why is the backup quarterback not getting any reps?" And the coach looked at him and I'm going to curse, so pardon my French here. And the coach looks at him and goes, if Peyton Manning goes down, we're fucked. And we don't practice fucked here. So like there's obviously that level to it also where like that like you can swim without goggles, but there are certain scenarios where it's like if you end up in this spot, it's over. So we're not gonna like we don't practice me getting up after falling over a hurdle. Because if I fall on a hurdle, it's over. Like it's done. You don't have to mess with it. But in terms of like Michael Phelps goggles breaking could be the equivalent of like my block slipping, which I mean we don't practice that, but it's because it's dangerous. But it's also something where it's like you could still be in it, so you like your fight or flight kicks in and you take over. So I mean practice is everything. It really is everything. That quote, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. It's a big misconception people have. I think until you get to this like bigger stage, like even the example of Noah Lyles in the 100 this past year at the Olympics. He did not have a great first two rounds. Nobody really thought he was going to win going into the last round. But people were like, oh, he rose to the occasion. It's like, no, he didn't. He's ran faster than that time before. He just fell to the level of his training. He knew he was ready for that moment physically and mentally, and he was able to make it happen.
I always think about I Steph Curry was on JJ Redick's podcast before JJ Redick became a head coach, and they were talking about, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen it. He had that one crazy play against the Clippers where he dribbled between like four guys and
Through
then shot at
everybody.
three.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wild. I mean, for those listening, if you haven't seen that play, please do yourself like just literally look up Steph Curry Clippers insane shot. It'll pop up. And they were talking about that, and Steph was saying, "Oh yeah, like I practice that all the time." And he said he was like anything that I do in a game, like I've practiced thousands of times. Like nothing
Mhm.
is new during like I don't try anything new. I just do everything that I've always practiced. And then he went on to talk about this idea of a flow state, which I've started looking into a lot more. Um, do you I guess first of all, from your vantage point, what is this flow state that athletes often bring up, and have you experienced that?
Yes, I have. I think flow state. is essentially this zone that people get into. I'm just going to say athletes for the sake of the conversation, that like athletes will get into where like there's nothing going on. Like anything out externally, internally, nothing's bothering. They're just fully in the moment. And I think flow state looks different for different people also, because there are some athletes that go into flow state and they're like, I couldn't tell you what happened. Like they just don't remember any of it. Then there's other athletes, which I think I fall into this category, where they're in the flow state. They're so focused and locked in that they can remember some of it. But it's just something where I don't know how to describe it. But you know it when you feel it. Like you'll look back on a moment and be like, yeah, like I was in flow state there.
I'm thinking because it's weird. Like I even experience it when I'm podcasting. This is like such a podcaster thing to say, but like there are certain times when I'm doing a podcast and I'm just so insanely concentrated on the conversation, and you're almost like in this different zone where nothing else matters, where you are just strictly focused on the task at hand, and in my scenario on what the person is saying. And it's weird for me because like I won't even have to think about the next question that I'm going to ask. It just kind of happens. I already, it's like my subconscious already knows what to ask, and then
Yeah.
it delivers it to the conscious, and it's like, all right, here's the next question. And it's like, yeah, it's weird. George Mumford, I mentioned him earlier, but he's done a lot of research on flow state, how to get into it. Highly recommend his work. We had TT Terry on the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and she worked with him extensively, and he helped her a lot, kind of get past some of the mental hurdles that she was, speaking of hurdles, mental hurdles that she was going through. And one of the things that he told her that I thought was pretty interesting was to just have fun. And it seems so simple because she would she would always stress about the fact like, oh, I didn't get my personal best this time around, or man, like I'm 2/10 of a second slower than I was. And he told her to just let loose and have fun. Do you think that's good advice? Like, what does that mean to you? Like, do you find yourself just having fun when you're out there on the track?
That is fantastic advice. And it's one of the first things I tell people when they ask me for advice in terms of competing. Because for me, like I love competing, but I hate losing so much to where I almost, I'll have moments where I'm like, I don't want to lose so badly that I almost don't want to compete that day. Or it's like I'm stressed out because it's like, what if I lose? So I have to remind myself a lot of times, like, this is fun. Like, I'm a professional track athlete. This is everything I've dreamed of. Let's just enjoy this and let's execute the race. But yeah, like, I work with a sports psychologist, and I've dealt with moments of like being so nervous, like I feel like I can't eat anything. Like even drinking things is difficult, and it's something we've like tried to work through. And one of the number one things that comes back is like, let's just have fun and try to beat people. Like whatever happens, gonna happen. We know I'm physically ready. We know I'm mentally ready. Just embrace the moment. Embrace the moment. Go have fun. And if you lose, that sucks. But there's always another day.
How much of your performance do you think is tied to the mental side of things?
A lot of it, especially at this level. Um, TT's coach, Dennis Mitchell, said, I think on the Netflix series, brought up a great point saying everyone at this level is physically ready. The difference is who's mentally ready. Because like high school, there might be some kids who aren't physically ready because they weren't working out, whatever. Even college, some kids might have been out partying that week, so you never know like if they're ready. But at the professional level, at the Olympic Games, every single person stepping to that line is ready. Every single person stepping to that line is ready to run a personal best. The only question is, are you mentally ready for the competition, for the crowd, the atmosphere, just everything that goes along with it? I mean, I think mental makes up a large portion of
You
being able to compete at a high level.
you talked about being nervous. What are some other mental hurdles Like, give us some tangible examples of things that you would, thoughts that would come across your mind, either before a race or even during a race.
During, there's nothing. I'm great once I start warming up and once they say on your mark. Those two moments, when I'm pretty much when I'm moving, I'm good. But when I'm like sitting around the hotel room or things like that is when those thoughts can come in. One of the things we worked on is like a thought's just a thought. The thought comes in, you acknowledge that it's there, and you let it go. You don't let it capitulate because everybody has those thoughts. I don't care who you are. Every professional athlete has those thoughts of like, what if I lose today? What if I'm not ready for this? And it's just a moment. You just have to let those thoughts come and go, and then kind of unpack it and be like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Why am I feeling this? Okay, I feel like, what if I'm not ready? Am I ready? You look back at the training you've done. Okay, I am ready. So that thought doesn't matter anymore. And then you kind of keep it moving.
Let's get back to your journey. So you go to Ashland, which we've highlighted as a D2 school with 5,000 undergrad students. We brought her up before just recently, but TT Terry went to USC, which is a D1 school with just a few more undergrad students. What what challenges, if any, does going to a D2 school present?
Honestly, I think a D2 school presents more advantages than it does disadvantages, depending on the one you go to. So, Ashland, I can only speak to my experience at Ashland. Ashland has a very rich track and field history. The head coach when I was there was Judd Logan, 4-time Olympian, was the American record holder in the hammer for a while, and he had been running that program for 20 some years. So you look at like Katie Moon, the pole vaulter, came from Ashland. Kibwe Johnson, a 2-time Olympian in the hammer throw, came from Ashland. A.G. Kruger, who's the current head coach at Ashland, 3-time Olympian, he trained under Judd. Derek and Joe Woodsky, Canadian hammer throwers, trained under Judd. Jackie Jesselnig Olm, Olympian in I think in the hammer, came from Ashland. So Ashland had this rich, extensive history of not just like track and field success at the D2 level, but at the Olympic level. So we had a coach, and they currently have a coach who knows what it takes to get to that level and can run the program as they see fit. And with Division Two, there's a lot more time to develop. Especially someone like me, I was able to contribute right away in terms of a conference and national scale, but that's not the case for a lot of freshmen. And that's not the case. But I feel like at like a Power Five Division One school, and I could be wrong, so don't take this to heart. But I feel like at a Division One school, if you're like one of the main recruits in the recruiting class and you're not contributing at a national level right away, it's like, hey, we got to go, like figure this out. Whereas at a Division Two school, Judd and Coach Clark there did a great job of kind of like letting people develop at their own pace and understand like how to lead them along. So for me, I didn't go in freshman year with them being like, hey, we need you to be a national qualifier in the hurdles freshman year. It was, hey, we want you to score at conference in the hurdles. If you can be on a relay team for nationals, that's great. And if you can get to national individual event, that's perfect. And then you can kind of progress those goals as we went through. And even once I got to the level of I could be a professional athlete soon, it wasn't like, hey, we need you to like make this Olympic team. It was, we're going to do the best we can to prepare you for this moment. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But we want to give you the best chance that we can.
So I'm thinking, and I have to ask this question because your journey, I mean, you grew up in this small village, you go to this D2 school, and then somehow out of all of that, here comes an Olympian in the 24 Paris Olympics, which, I mean, you've said didn't go maybe the way that you wanted to. And we'll get into some of your Olympic experience. I have a couple questions there. But you wish you had performed better. Nonetheless, finished eighth overall in the 400-meter hurdles. You're poised to do even better next time around. You won bronze in the 2022 World Championships. All this, your entire journey culminates into this question, which is if we simulated your life 1,000 times, and how many of those simulations would you be more or less where you are today?
That's a great question. And I'm thinking about it right now in terms of we all have these moments, like these like fork in the road moments, right? You can either go this way or you can go this way. So in high school, it could have been like, do I want to go to these parties or do I want to just like focus on sports? Choose focus on sports. And I'm sure in some of those simulations, I'd probably choose the other one. Or there's moments where it's like, do I want to commit to Ashland or do I want to go to this small, super small Division I school for the sake of saying I can be a Division I athlete? I think out of 1,000 simulations, I think I end up where I am right now. I'd say probably 50 to 60% of the time. Because I think at the end of the day, for me, it always came down to my work ethic, being willing to outwork other people. And then I've always been willing to take the road less traveled. So I've obviously growing up when I first started doing sports, I'm like, I want to be a Division I athlete because that's what everyone wants, right? You want to be on ESPN, CBS, whatever. But then when it came down to like, oh, I'm choosing between Ashland University or like a Miami of Ohio, it's like, okay, is there really much difference between those two programs outside of being able to say you're Division I? And when I sat down and looked at that, I was like, no, not really. So I'm going to go to this program that has a history of one, having an Olympian as a head coach and has also produced pro athletes. And I wanted to compete for championships. And Ashland had always been competitive in terms of a national championship scale. And then when I got there, we ended up winning 3 in a row. So those were things that I valued because I've always looked at it like you can only do sports for so long. So I wanted to be able to get the most out of it that I can every single year. And like, let's say one of those simulations, I end up running at Ashland, but I don't end up being good enough to be a pro athlete. That's fine because I did everything I wanted to do while I was there. So I would have had no regrets about it. But yeah, I would say that's a phenomenal question, by the way. Um, but yeah, I'd say probably like 50 to 60% of the time, I feel like I end up here.
It's top of mind because we just had the author of Elway, which is a biography on John Elway. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
And in John Elway's journey, his family was living in Washington State at the time, and John was getting into football. I think he was a freshman in high school. And the high school team that he was playing for in Washington State, like, barely threw the ball. Like, they ran an offense where it's like, if they throw the ball 5 times a game, it's a miracle. And so
Yeah.
he's in this like run first offense, and by some divine intervention, his family ends up moving to LA, and he goes to this high school where the head coach of that high school in LA was pass happy, like air it out 30, 40 times a
Mm-hmm.
game. And Elway was really able to showcase his talent as a quarterback. By the way, go on YouTube and look up John Elway's high school highlights. I guarantee you've never seen anything like it. Like it's like it's like this high school kid just like running 20 yards back and then chucking it 70 yards like a perfect dot to a receiver in like the corner of the end. Like incredible. All that to say, if his family doesn't move to LA and he hasn't showcased his skills, there may not be a John Elway. And it's funny because John Elway is quoted as saying in an interview, if my family hadn't moved to LA, I probably don't end up playing football. And it's those fork in the road moments and those little life events that don't seem that significant in the moment that literally end up changing the entire trajectory of your career and your life.
Yeah, the more I think about it too, like I didn't want to go to Ashland because it was where my older sister went to school. But I was like, like they're pretty interested. Um, the coach there, the sprint hurdle coach there, Coach Clark, had been there for a year at that point, and he was super interested. So I'm like, let me, like, I'd worked with him with track camps and stuff like that. I was like, let me go on a visit. And I went on a visit and just seeing like the weight room atmosphere, the practice atmosphere. I'm like, I was ready to commit like on the spot. But yeah, it's moments like that where it's like, if if Judd hadn't brought in Coach Clark, I wouldn't have gone to Ashland. Or if one of the other Division II schools I was looking at was Grand Valley State, and they're like one of Ashland's rivals. If Grand Valley State I was ready to commit there. If they had given me a better scholarship offer, I would have committed there, no questions asked. So yeah, it's just those little moments where like if things just go a little bit differently, who knows what happens.
It also makes you think about what decisions are you making today that are impacting your trajectory tomorrow.
Dude, now 50% feels high.
Now you're just rethinking.
I'm gonna say 30. I'll say 30%.
Final answer, 30%. Out of
1,000 simulations, I'll say 300 of them we end up here. Because I still feel like that's kind of high, but I'm gonna trust simulation version of myself.
Yeah, then when you also factor in just how many decisions you're making on a daily basis, you know, are you training today? Did you skip a day? What meals are you eating? I mean, it's like the butterfly effect. You know, it's like butterfly flaps its wings 1,000 miles away. It alters the wind current, and then this happens, that happens. It's like this entire scenario. Yeah, crazy to think about. I think about it in my life too. It's like, what am I choosing to do today? Like us sitting down for this podcast. Like, I don't know. I mean, you know, it maybe
I'm literally writing down that question because that's one of the best questions I've ever heard.
Awesome. So Trevor, let's get to your Olympic experience.
Yeah.
We mentioned 2022. You win bronze in the World Championships. You qualify for the Paris Olympics. You're representing Team USA. Before we get into what happens in terms of your kind of on the competition side of things, I just have some like overarching questions about the Olympics. And we've had other Olympians on the podcast. And I'll start here. A lot of people don't realize that if you are an unsponsored Olympic, well, first of all, a lot of people don't realize how expensive the Olympics truly are. And then on top of that, a lot of people don't realize that if you are not sponsored, it is especially difficult. So can you talk a little bit, just the financial burden of competing in the Olympics without any outside help or outside money?
Yeah, so the Olympics in and of itself was fine because that's something where like the U.S. Olympic Committee covers pretty much everything. But in terms of qualifying for the Olympics, that's where the burden is. Right. So, for example, I flew out. The Olympic trials were in Eugene, Oregon. Super far away, pain in the butt to get to, can be pretty expensive. So I'm out there for 2 weeks. I pay for hotel, rental car, entry fee, food while I'm there. And that doesn't even include the fact I was in Oregon 2 or 3 weeks prior to train because I trained with a college coach. So the college team was out there for NCAAs. So I went out there to train with them. That's another like 3 or 4 days with a rental car, an Airbnb. So that money adds up. And it's one of those things where like, if you don't compete well in a pro race as an unsponsored athlete, prize money is essentially where your income comes from. So for me, my income mainly comes from prize money, grants like the USA Track and Field Foundation, incredible organization. They help fund the dreams of countless track and field athletes. I would not have been able to become an Olympian without that foundation. So I'm always going to sing their praises. They do great work. They're fantastic. So it's prize money, grants, public speaking, if you can get into that. Some people do personal training stuff. And that's pretty much like the only source of income you have. So if you go, like me, I didn't race a lot this last season because I hurt my hamstring in April. I came back from it, ran terribly before the Olympic trials. So I canceled like 3 or 4 races because I just wanted to train to get my head right for the Olympic trials. Then you make the Olympic Games. Then everything's like fine because the U.S. Olympic Committee covers your flight. Everything at the village is covered. Like from there, you're good. But one of the things we did, because obviously my wife wanted to go to the Olympics, we weren't going to do it, but her stepdad convinced us to start a GoFundMe page. So we're like, okay. We started GoFundMe. We just set the goal for like $5,000. We're like, hey, we're not sharing it. We're not posting it anywhere. If people ask for it, we'll give it to them, but that's it. So my aunt asked for it, and I sent it to her, and she's like, "Can I post it?" I'm like, "Yeah, you do whatever you want with it. You can post it." And within a day, we hit $5,000. We hit the goal, and I was like, "Wow!" And I like joked with my wife. I was like, "We should have put the goal higher, like whatever," because I thought people were gonna stop donating once I hit the goal. By the time I left for the Olympics, what was mainly just coming from like my small town of Bluffton and like the surrounding villages raised $26,000. It was unreal, the support and the love we got from people. So that was able to like lift a big financial burden from the season, because that essentially made up for those races I didn't get to go to because I was injured or because I was focusing on training.
That's incredible. $26,000. Wow. How do sponsorships work? Like, is it you reaching out, or like how does that relationship develop?
So we all have agents. So I have agents, and they essentially reach out to the shoe company representatives, and they kind of just go back and forth. And some have good relationships with some shoe companies, some have bad relationships. So it's kind of like finding the sweet spot and trying to work out a deal that works for both sides. Because obviously the shoe company doesn't want to pay someone a ton of money if they don't think they're worth a ton of money, but the agents also want to get the absolute most value they can get for their athlete. So it's just kind of like this tug of war going back and forth.
Yeah. So you get to the Olympics, and I'm gonna assume, but I'll let you elaborate. I'm assuming it's like a larger than life experience. It's like this surreal thing. For those of us, myself included, who will never compete in the Olympics as an athlete, try can you try to just describe the feelings, the emotions? What are you seeing? I saw that you took a picture with LeBron. I'm insanely jealous. Like the whole thing is just in the opening ceremony, the performances. I mean, I'll let you take the floor and just try to put into words as best as you can just that entire experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was unreal, man. What I've been telling people is that it was everything I dreamed of and then some. Like the opening ceremony, like we're all waiting to get on the boat, seeing the NBA guys, the pro golfers, whatever, and it starts pouring rain. But honestly, like none of us cared. Like it was just pouring rain, but there were people lining up along the whole side of the river with flags chanting USA, floating by the Eiffel Tower with the Olympic rings on it right as it lit up and started flashing lights. Seeing the village was massive. Seeing like everything the village had to offer was really cool. And I mean the stadium, man. The track and field stadium was beautiful. The purple track, 80,000 people sold out every single day, screaming their heads off at 9 a.m. And my first round, I had a French hurdler and the world record holder in my heat. When they announced the French dude's name, because he was like, France is the host country, I have never heard a crowd get so loud. It was unreal. It was honestly, like, yeah, I can't really describe much of it. It was everything I imagined and then some.
How the LeBron pick go down? Were you just like, hey man, like big fan, just like snap the
Yeah,
pic?
I mean, pretty much he was just like standing there. So I walked over. I said, "Hey, like LeBron, you mind if I get a picture?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, sure." So I'm getting a picture. I said, "Hey, man, Ohio versus the world. You know how it is." And he laughed a little bit, and then I kind of got out of there because I'm like, I don't want to be one of those people like hanging around too
Yeah,
long, you know.
yeah, yeah. She's just like asking questions. He's like trying to get away. Yeah, that'd be pretty awkward.
Yeah.
I mean, I also feel like at this point, LeBron is like well trained in the whole,
Oh, you
interaction.
have to be right. You
Yeah,
have to be.
yeah. That it's always fun. So I mean, definitely different scenario. I mean, way different experience. But I saw Greg Olson. I was on a flight from I can't remember where, but for some reason I had a layover in Charlotte, and he just happened to be on the
Mhm.
same flight. And I saw him like before we started boarding, and I was like, man, like I'm a huge Greg Olson fan, but do I really want to be like one of those guys where I'm like, hey man, like he's with his family, like I don't want to,
Yeah.
intrude. So he boards, and like I say obviously, but he's in first class, and I'm like boarding the plane, and I see him sitting down. I'm like, dude, screw it. I'm gonna just, if he denies me, whatever. So I'm like, hey Greg, like big fan, like can I just take a pic? And he was like, yeah, of course. So like I took a selfie. And then the lady who was in front of me boarding was like, hey, like, is that someone famous? I'm like, oh, lady.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's not.
Yeah. It's like, I'm just
Dude,
taking a picture with a random guy.
I also like Greg Olson. He kind of got screwed. He should still be like the main Fox guy. I understand
Yes.
why they tried. I understand why the allure of Tom Brady. He's not as good as Greg, and I'll stand by that until he gets better. I was so mad when I found that out, but that's a
Dude,
whole other deal.
Greg Olson and the one thing that I love, like my favorite commentators, like they'll actually break down the game. And
Yeah.
it's like someone like a normal fan like me wouldn't realize. It's like, oh, the 49ers ran a stick route against this zone coverage, which is why it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Or, they ran this zone read. I don't see that as a fan. I just see like what happens. I'm not like analyzing, oh my God, they came out with a 3 wide receiver set, which means this and then that. And
Right.
Greg was just so good at that. Like he was great at
Yeah.
like giving us that extra detail. And I don't know, Brady might get there.
I think he will. He's just so new to it, which is why I'm like he shouldn't get the prime spot. Like
Right.
put him as the number 2 and he can kind of work up. But I also
Yeah.
understand why it's like it's Tom Brady. We want to give him the top spot.
Yeah. I hope he brings more of like the quarterback like analysis, or it's like, hey, the quarterback was seeing this, or he's probably thinking
Yeah.
this, or just like that side
Sort
that
of,
like,
sort of like how Romo does.
yeah. It's weird because
Romo, he
like
can be he can be a bit much though.
he can, but isn't it kind of weird how like Romo is being appreciated more now because of Brady? I at least like feel that because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were out on Romo as an
People
announcer.
loved him for the first year, then we're out on him. Then
Yeah.
Brady came in and everyone's kind of like, "Oh, like Romo's actually he's not
No,
too bad."
not bad. Like I don't mind him predicting the play. Like I don't mind him telling me like, hey,
I
this is a
still
run
I
to the
still
right.
think I still think that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I think not to turn this into a Romo discussion, but I think a big reason why people were out on him because I think he stopped doing that. And if I had to guess, I think people above him probably said like, hey, maybe let's not predict the play like every other play, like let's kind of let it play out. But
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I just think it adds a whole nother element. Like there's no other announcer who does that. I mean, it's just the Romo
No.
thing.
No.
And then you got Chris Collinsworth with his Mahomes love.
Yeah.
That guy can't
Yeah.
stop thinking about Mahomes. It's wild. There was a play the Niners were playing the Cowboys Sunday Night Football last week, and Purdy did this like scramble, and he's like, "Man, it looks a little Mahomey." I was
And
like,
you're like, he's not even playing. He's not even playing in the game.
"Wild." All right, Trevor, back to you. So you're in this surreal experience. What's the Olympic Village like, by the way? Like, if you had to describe it, what would you say?
I say it's a lot like a college campus. Like every country has its building. Obviously, like the bigger the country, the more of a building you have. So, like I think we had like 2 buildings, but some countries just have like a floor in a building. They only have a couple athletes. So, but yeah, they had the cafeteria, they had a grocery store, a cell phone store for the sponsors. Um, they had non-alcoholic beer and like a Modelo area you could go to. Um, there was like a cafe, like an arcade area. Like it was really essentially like a college campus.
And what's the because I've heard some pretty crazy stories that it gets a little wild in these Olympic villages. Is any of that true? And then just like in general, like what's the relationship amongst athletes?
I'll say yes, that's true. Um, the relationship is good. Like pin trading is a really big thing there, so like that kind of helps like break the tension a little bit and get athletes to like walk up to each other, trade pins, get like your country's pins, try and find like figure out like which country has cool ones, try to get theirs. But yeah, I mean everything's pretty cool. Obviously, like countries kind of stick to each other. Like they're gonna hang out with their own countrymen and women. But for the most part, yeah, it's just like everyone's there, just like having a good time and trying to make the most of it.
Well, and you're a married man, so you were, you kept your eyes down.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. So I had the day of my first race, I had to shake out at like 5 a.m. Right. And I was toward track and field finished the Olympics. So I was towards like the end of it. So I wake up at like 4:40, whatever, and I find a spot in between buildings. It's like flat. So I'm gonna do my shakeout here. I'm doing my shakeout, and next
Really
thing I
quick,
know,
really quick. What's a shakeout?
yeah. So like if you're gonna race, it's just like you wake up, you jog, do some
Hmm,
stretches, some exercise, just kind of like get the blood flowing, get your nervous system awake, pretty much for the
got
day.
it. Got it. Okay.
So yeah, so it's like 5 a.m. It's dark out, and I look over, and about 30 yards away from me are just these two athletes just making out on the ground. I'm assuming out still from the night before, and I'm like, they've probably been done for a while. I'm here compete. I'm still competing. I'm warming up to start my competition, and these two people are taking full advantage of whatever the village has to offer.
Love it. I mean, listen, you put a lot of, in shape athletes around each other, and
And when the games are done, some people like to decompress, and some people have different ways of decompressing. So,
I respect it. Listen, man, whatever floats your boat. I do not judge.
nope, not at all.
So, Trevor, as we kind of wrap up the pod here, we'll kind of end with your performance at the Olympics. And so I'll give you the stage. Just general thoughts on how you performed. I guess let's start here. What happened during the Olympics? I mentioned earlier that you finished eighth, but just so that the audience understands what actually happened, and then your thoughts and your performance.
Yeah. So first round did not go to plan. I end up running 49.3. I think 49.3. End up going to the new repechage rounds that they had made, which is essentially if you weren't one of the automatic qualifiers, you had to race the next morning. So I go to race the next morning. Next morning's race goes great. I win the heat, fastest time in the round, on to the semifinals. Semis, I get lane 2, which for people that don't know, the further inside you are, kind of like the less ideal it is once you get past like lane 4, especially for someone my height, because those turns are tight. You can't open up your stride. Ran a really good race, went 48.2, finished 8th. Normally the top 8 go through, but the way they had set up the round was it was top 2 in each heat auto qualified and the next 2 fastest. Well, I ended up in a fast heat, so the top 2 qualified. But then there was a different heat where the second place finisher ran a slower time than me. So the ninth place person got to go through, and the eighth place person, who was me, did not make the final. So like my thoughts on the whole deal, round 1 didn't go well. I got too caught up in the moment, trying to find that balance between like soaking in the moment, being present, but also being locked in. I didn't do a good job of it. The gun went off faster than I thought it would. Normally at those championship meets, they hold you for a really long time. So I was kind of prepared for that, which I shouldn't have been. You got to play it honest. So when the gun shot off fast, I kind of had a bad reaction, and I rushed my first couple steps out of the blocks, made me take off further away from the hurdle, and then I just panicked and got like super tense, and it just put me behind. My race the next morning in the repechage round went exactly to plan. The race I ran in the repechage round should have just been my first round race. It wouldn't have had a problem. And then the race in the semifinal went great. I have no complaints about it. I ran 48.2. Each round got faster. And I ran that race in a way where I feel like if I was in a more outside lane, it's a faster race and I get through to the final. And then I firmly believe if I make the final, I get a medal. Obviously, it doesn't matter that I say that because I didn't, but that's just kind of how my brain works. And so I really just let one small mental lapse kind of derailed the whole thing. And we got it back as good as we could have. but yeah, it just goes to show how like one small mental lapse on a stage like that can really throw it. It's like the butterfly effect. If I don't have that round, if I run that first round how I'm supposed to, we make the semifinal. I don't have to race 3 straight days. I get a better lane. A better lane, I probably run faster, make the final. Make the final, all gloves are off. I think I medal. So that small thing could have been the difference, hypothetically, between getting a medal and not. So it's just something that I won't let happen again, and it's something I'll be prepared for now.
I'm glad you brought up the mental lapse that you had, and just so that everyone's aware, like these competitions are wild because it's like seconds and tenths of seconds that separate first place from eighth. This was wild to me. So first place overall, I had a time of 46:46.
Yep.
You had a time of, I believe, 48:29.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's less than 2 seconds that separates you from first place.
Well, what's crazier is that the gap between me and the slowest qualifier for the final was 0.09. 900ths of a second was what kept me from making the final. With all of that other stuff that I dealt with, 900ths kept me out of the final.
I asked TT the same question, and I'll ask you because I just think it's incredible. So in any other sport, right? Like basketball, football, basketball, you got 48 minutes, you got 4 quarters. Football,
Multiple plays.
multiple plays. Football, same thing, right? 4 quarters, 60 minutes. Hockey, name any sport you want. You basically have a whole game. And then on top of that, you have a whole season. So it's like we see it time and time again. NFL quarterback starts terrible first half of the season, turns it on other half of the season,
Yeah.
whatever. Same thing with basketball. You guys, and when I say you guys, track and field athletes, Olympians, you basically have one shot at it where it's if you don't, using your experience as an example, if everything doesn't go according to plan, right? Like you're out. Like you get a bad time, you're done. What kind
Yeah.
of added pressure does that put on your performance?
It's a ton. I mean, I'm not going to act like it's not. It's essentially like if an NFL team makes it to the Super Bowl and they're like, you have one play. We're going to give you the ball. We're going to give you the ball at the 20 yard, in the red zone, 20-yard line. You have one play. Go score. And it's like, you don't score. It's like, okay, well, let's see if these guys score. And you kind of go about it that way. It's a ton of pressure, especially like I'm in a position where I'm a world-class athlete, but I'm not necessarily like the top tier in terms of performance. So like for me, everything has to go to plan and for me to make something happen. Some athletes are at such a high level where that doesn't have to be the case. Like Mondo in the pole vault, he's the best to ever do it. He can have an off day and still win the Olympics. But that's his world. That's his deal. So knowing that, yeah, like everything, every athlete wants everything to go to plan. I've always prided myself on when things don't go to plan, I'm able to rebound and bounce back from it. And I still feel like I did. I didn't make the final, I didn't medal. But the way I bounced back in those 2 rounds and fought and gave everything I had, I still walked away proud of the whole experience.
Well, to add to your NFL analogy, not only do you have one play, but if you don't get it, you have to wait 4 years. I mean, in your case, right?
Yes.
If we're talking about competing in the Olympics, you got to wait till 2028 to get another shot at this thing.
Yeah.
Which, do you ever like? Do you ever get restless? Like, do you ever just wish the next Olympics was tomorrow?
I mean, not necessarily tomorrow,
You're right.
but
Yeah.
like this upcoming summer, I would love for it to be another Olympics this summer because I feel great. I know I'll be ready for it. But it's also something where it's like, okay, we just have to keep building and building and make sure that when 2028 comes around, that we're not going to have those mistakes. We're going to be ready to go. And then I can't imagine there's a better feeling in the world than winning an Olympic gold medal on home soil. I have a hard time thinking there's too many better feelings in life than that.
Yeah. Well, listen, man. You got a fan in me. So we will be rooting hard for you 2028. Um, and then obviously in between there as well with the world championships and everything else that happens. Trevor, I want to be respectful of your time, but I got a couple more questions I have to ask you, and we can do these more rapid fire.
Yep,
Um,
let's hear
I guess before we get to the rapid fire, one last question on the Olympics. I
it.
was
Okay.
thinking because I've talked to Olympians and I've other people who are involved with Olympians. What do you think most people get wrong about Olympians?
What most people get wrong.
Yeah, like if you had to if there was a general public opinion or something that has been said about Olympians, like is there anything that comes to mind that you would say it's actually not like that?
I mean, there's really not anything that I can think of off the top of my head, which I know I'll think of something in like a half hour after we hang up.
Right.
But I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, unless it's just something where it's like, no, I can't. I don't know. That's actually a good question. I don't know what the general consensus is on us.
Well, and that's the thing. I think the general consensus is usually positive.
Yeah.
Like I think most people, and if they don't, they're idiots. But I think most people realize the amount of work it takes to compete in these events, the work that happens in between that most people don't see.
Yeah.
It's easy to go compete. When you're running in front of 80,000 people, it's easy to get up and feel excited, right? And be like, all right, here we go. I imagine it's a little more difficult in the summer in Gainesville when there's no one
Oh,
watching.
I got it. We don't just race every 4 years.
Mm.
Like the number one question I've gotten since is, are you going for 28? Like, are you ready for 2028? I said, listen, I have Tokyo World Championships in 2025. There's a new World Championship system in 2026. There's, I think, Beijing in 2027. So I'm like, we have more track meets, more championships. So I feel like a lot of people just think it's literally Olympics, 3 years off, train, Olympic Games. Like, no, this train does not stop. We get like 3 weeks off, 3 weeks to a month off, but other than that, this train just keeps rolling.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, that's something before I started talking to Olympians and actually getting into some of the nitty gritty. That's something that I definitely thought. I mean, I was one of those idiots where I was like, okay, great. Like, so between now and 2028, man, what are you up to? But no, now it's you start to realize just how many events you have.
Yeah.
All right, Trevor, a couple more questions. These are I guess maybe a couple fun ones to round us out here, and then we'll end it.
Okay.
Big Tennessee Titans fan, which is rough right now.
Massive.
I know you
Massive.
are. I see the tweets and the retweets. Will Levis, what's the deal, man? You in or you out?
I'm in. I still have faith in the man.
No.
Because here's hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me
All
out.
right.
He's young. He hasn't even started a full 16 games yet. It's a brand new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback coach, and they have like six new starters on the offense. I understand he might not be the guy. Like, I'm not going to be like pounding the table for him, but I'm going to be patient with him. I say give him all this season and all of next season, and we'll see what happens. I don't love this quarterback class, so run it back next season. Give him a full year with the coaching staff and everything. Run it back, and then if he's not doing great, I think next year's quarterback class is going to be pretty dang good. So I'm in. We're actually going to the Titans game this weekend against the Patriots, so I'm very excited. I'm still in on my guy though.
I think there's a bigger issue with young quarterbacks. I saw this tweet and it was like, Bryce Young is whatever 23, Will Levis, I think he's 25, 26 maybe. He might not even
Yeah.
be that old. It's like all these Anthony Richardson, 24 or whatever. And it's like all these young quarterbacks, man, that it feels like the team gives up way too soon. And like Sam Darnold, if you want to talk about an example of a guy who's young and who took a quick minute, a hot minute to get accustomed to the NFL, Like Sam Darnold is exhibit A, like terrible with the Jets, terrible with the Panthers, went to the 49ers, sat behind Purdy and Shanahan for a year, and all of a sudden he's calmed down a bit, but was playing really well with the
I mean,
Vikings
look
and
at Geno. Look at Geno in
yeah,
Seattle. Same
yeah.
deal.
So I don't know. I mean, it's top of mind because of the whole Anthony Richardson thing and whether or not he should still be starting for the Colts. But it's like these guys it's like if you're not balling out in like the first 7 games, like good luck, man. Like it's tough to bounce back.
As a Titans fan, I'm glad they benched Anthony Richardson. Just keep cycling through 40-year-old quarterbacks for the next couple of years. That's fine with me. Keep going, Indy. Keep it rolling.
Who do you hate most in that division? I have to add. Okay, actually, before I say this, AFC South is probably the least relevant division.
I agree.
In the entire NFL. I don't want to be mean.
I can't argue that, but you're not wrong.
Like Houston, new-ish franchise. We're kind of relevant with Watson. Are relevant now with Stroud, obviously. Tennessee, you had the CJ2K years. You had the Tannehill and Henry years.
Gosh, those are good years.
Those were good years, man. Beating the Chiefs that one year. I still remember that game. That was wild.
I still thought we went up in the AFC Championship game 17-7 in the first half. I was convinced we were going to the Super Bowl. And I still think we would have beat the 49ers if we did. But that's a whole other combo.
Yeah, let's not get into that. And then the Jaguars, who are, I mean, they're the Jaguars.
They're the Jaguars.
But who do you hate most in that division?
I'd probably have to say the Jaguars.
Really?
Because I respect the Colts because Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. Like, for the most part, they seem like a well-run organization. They have a good history. Houston, I don't really have a problem with. They've had solid years from Matt Schaub to Deshaun Watson, had some good years. And now CJ Stroud's really good. I like DeMeco Ryans as a head coach. The Jaguars have just always been kind of like, they've been irrelevant for the most part. They had that one random year with Blake Bortles where they almost made the Super Bowl. But then other than that, and back in like the early 2000s, they haven't really done anything, but I feel like their fans just talk all the time. So out of those 3 teams, I can't deal with the Jags.
The Jags are weird because they've been irrelevant, but also surprisingly relevant somehow. Like you brought up the Bortles years. Like even with Trevor Lawrence, like that comeback against the Chargers, what was that 2 years ago in the playoffs? Like they've been like weirdly just hanging around.
Yeah, hanging around's the perfect way to word it.
Yeah. Yeah, weird. Shout out Jacksonville, man. If you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, I mean, hit me up because there's not too many of you. But to Trevor's point, you guys are loud. So
I'm not shouting you guys out.
Go DM Trevor. If you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, go DM Trevor and make your voice be heard. Trevor, one last question. Nickelback, underrated, overrated, or properly rated?
Underrated.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because here's the thing. I don't know when, and I was a victim of it, when it became like a cool thing to hate on him. I bought into it. But then you go back and you listen to some of the music. How You Remind Me is such a fire song. That's the only argument I need. And I know I saw it on TikTok. There's like a clip from like one of the Deadpool commercials where Deadpool just like rolls through how great Nickelback is with like all their accomplishments. So yeah, I'm underrated. I've been trying to fight that fight in the training group down here for a while. I've been losing, but I'm going to keep fighting it.
We need to someone needs to do a study on like when the Nickelback hate started and why.
They just like became a meme for no reason, but for whatever reason, everyone's bought into it.
Yeah. And like you're right, like if you go back and listen to some of their old stuff, man, like it's
like you listen to their hits, they are hits, dude.
Yeah. Like How You Remind, dude, you play How You Remind Me okay, here's an experiment for all of those who hate Nickelback. Play How You Remind Me at a party and then tell me what the reaction is, because I guarantee
you hit up the touch tunes at the bar and throw some
Mm.
Nickelback on, yeah,
It's a hit, man. People are into it.
it's a
I'm telling you,
hit.
it's a hit.
It's a hit.
Listen,
They did a whole SNL skit about the song.
yeah, I will fight this fight with you. You have another, you have support coming in. I'm a Nickelback stan.
I appreciate it, man, because I've been fighting out here.
Trevor, on that note, dude, this has been a fantastic conversation. It's great. I love speaking with Olympians because they come from all different shapes, sizes, colors, from all around the United States, even international. And everyone has like their own unique journey, which makes it really cool. It's why I started this podcast, talking to athletes to try and uncover some of those stories and some of those journeys, how everybody gets. We talked about the little moments that can impact your entire life, and everyone has them. So it's been an honor, man, to hear your journey and your story, and everything that you've accomplished thus far. And I wish you nothing but the best moving forward, as you head into World Championship season and then obviously 2028. But before we sign off, where can people find you, and is there anything that you want to plug?
Yeah, I mean, the main social media I use is Instagram, at Trevor Bassitt 30. It's just my name, the number 30. My Twitter account's the exact same. I don't really tweet much. I'm more of like a retweeter. Unless I think of something funny to tweet, then I'll tweet something. But yeah, for the most part, if you want to like keep up with me, what I'm doing, it's going to be Instagram's the way to go.
Love it. Trevor, this has been great. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks for having me. Tighten up. Big game this weekend.
Love it. Do not tighten up. Nobody will be tightening up. Love it. Till next time, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.